The world was white, not the soft, welcoming white of clouds or flowers, but the hard, merciless white of endless snow stretching across the horizon. The wind howled through the narrow cracks of the rocky cliffs, dragging with it a chill so deep it seemed to pierce bone. It was the kind of cold that stole breath from lungs and stung the eyes like knives. In this frozen wilderness, a lone figure trudged forward, Garok, the caveman whose tribe had once called him the boring one. He was not the strongest, nor the fiercest, nor the bravest. He did not fight mammoths or roar in council fires. While others hunted beasts or boasted of conquests, Garok watched, listened, and thought. That was his curse and his gift. For though the others laughed, it was Garok who wondered how to make the nights less cruel, how to find comfort where none existed. As the sun dipped low, painting the ice in pink and gold, Garok returned to his cave. The wind had already started its nightly scream, pushing snow into spirals that danced like ghosts. Inside, his tribe huddled close, wrapped in animal skins stiff with frost. The fire in the center flickered weakly, throwing more shadow than heat. Children whimpered in their sleep, and the elders groaned softly, their joints aching from the cold. Every winter, they lost someone, a baby too small to survive the chill, or an old one too tired to fight. Each dawn, Garok feared who might not wake. He dropped his bundle of dried moss and twigs beside the fire, brushing the frost from his hair. The others barely looked up. They called him Boring Caveman because he did not tell stories or shout in excitement. When the hunters spoke of the day's kill, he only nodded. When they danced to the rhythm of bone drums, he sat quietly by the fire, staring at the patterns of smoke. Yet tonight, as the storm outside thickened and the air turned sharp as glass, Garok's quiet mind stirred with something new. He looked at the smoke again, not just its beauty, but its meaning. The smoke rose and curled along the ceiling of the cave, lingering near the top, where the air felt warmer. Warmth. That was it. The warmth stayed high, but the people slept low, close to the freezing stone. He stood up, slowly, as if moved by some hidden instinct. The others glanced at him, puzzled. He picked up a small torch and walked toward the back of the cave, where shadows swallowed the walls. There, he found a smaller chamber, narrow, enclosed, the air thicker. He crouched and felt the stone beneath his palm. Cold, but less cold than near the entrance. He gathered dry grass and animal fur, arranging them in a low pile, almost like a nest. He built a tiny fire, smaller than the main one, so the smoke would not choke them. The flames licked the air gently, and soon the space began to change. It was subtle at first, the air softening, the stone losing its bite. Then, a faint warmth spread, enough to notice, enough to breathe easier. Garok smiled, a small, quiet smile no one saw. When he returned to the main chamber, the others were shivering. He pointed to the smaller one behind him and gestured for them to follow. They hesitated. Boring Caveman had never led before. What could he know that the hunters or the firekeepers did not? But curiosity, or perhaps desperation, pulled them along. One by one, they crawled into the small chamber. At first they grumbled, too tight, too smoky, too strange. But as the minutes passed, they felt it, the warmth gathering, their breath no longer freezing in the air. The children stopped whimpering. The elders sighed in relief. Even the hunters, proud and stubborn, stretched out their limbs and closed their eyes. Outside, the blizzard screamed louder, pounding the earth like a wild beast. Snow piled at the cave's mouth, sealing them in darkness. Yet within that dark, something miraculous was happening. For the first time in many winters, no one was freezing. The small chamber held their heat like a womb, the furs and moss absorbing and reflecting it. Garok sat quietly by the wall, his eyes half closed, listening to the soft breathing of his tribe. It was not excitement he felt, not pride, not triumph, but peace. For in his stillness, he had found what no warrior had, a way to make the night kind. Hours passed. The fire in the outer chamber had long died, but inside the little warm pocket, the air remained gentle. A few of the hunters stirred and whispered among themselves. Maybe Boring Caveman not so boring, one murmured, his voice low, almost ashamed. Another nodded. He thinks strange thoughts, but good ones. Garok did not answer. He was staring again at the flicker of light on stone, watching how it danced. His mind wandered further. If heat could be trapped, maybe it could be spread. If stone could hold warmth, maybe water could too. The night stretched endlessly, but Garok's thoughts glowed brighter than the fire. When dawn came, the storm had left a white ocean outside the cave. But inside, they were alive. All of them. Children laughed and chased each other around the ashes. The elders smiled through cracked lips. The hunters clapped Garok on the back, rough but grateful. He said little, as always. He only looked at the snow beyond the cave and thought of how the world had changed, not through noise or muscle, but through quiet thinking. And so began the legend of how the boring caveman taught his tribe to sleep warm through the deadliest winters, not by fighting nature, but by listening to it. The days that followed the storm became something of a quiet wonder in the tribe. Word spread from mouth to mouth, from cave to cave, how Garok, the boring caveman, had made a small fire that could keep an entire family warm through the deadliest of nights. No one could quite explain it. They had always built great fires in the open spaces, believing size meant safety. But Garok's tiny, hidden flame had done more than any roaring blaze. It was not the fire's strength that mattered, he realized, but how the warmth was held. Like a secret, warmth wanted to stay where it was respected, not wasted. And so, as the sun rose each morning and melted just a skin of snow from the rocks, Garok began to experiment. He watched how smoke moved, how air flowed, how stone drank heat. He touched everything, fur, wood, moss, even bones, feeling which stayed warm the longest. What others saw as strange behavior, he saw as patterns whispering their truths. Soon, the others began to notice changes. Garok no longer sat silently by the main fire. He had started rearranging the sleeping spaces, moving stones to form walls, laying layers of moss and fur beneath the skins. When they asked what he was doing, he simply said, "Making the cave remember warmth." They laughed at first. A cave, remember warmth? Stones could not think. But when night came again, the laughter faded. The new sleeping area felt different, softer, less biting. The cold still crept in, but slower, gentler, as if unsure it belonged there. The air no longer cut through their bones. The next morning, Garok woke to find the others still asleep, their faces relaxed, their breath calm. For the first time in months, they had slept through the night. The hunters, always proud and skeptical, decided to test him. "Make my corner warm too," one said, his tone mocking but curious. Garok agreed. He studied the rock wall near the man's bedding and noticed a crack where cold wind seeped in. He blocked it with flat stones, sealed the gaps with damp clay, and hung an animal hide across the space. Then he added a low fire pit, shallow, small, fed with slow-burning wood. The next morning, that hunter's laughter echoed through the cave. It worked. "My toes not freeze," he shouted, stamping the ground. Others gathered around, eager now, their eyes wide with new respect. "Do mine next," they said. "And mine." For the first time, Garok was not invisible. His silence had become a kind of language, and everyone was beginning to learn it. As days turned into weeks, Garok's quiet work reshaped their home. The large open chamber where the tribe had once slept became a living labyrinth of warmth. Walls of stacked stones created smaller sleeping pockets. Furs hung like curtains to trap heat. Moss carpets covered the cold floor, turning stone into something almost soft. The fires were smaller now, several gentle flames instead of one great blaze. The air became thick, comfortable, breathing with life. The tribe began to call these pockets warmth nests. At first, they were meant for sleeping, but soon, mothers began nursing their babies there, elders rested there during the day, and even the hunters came to sit after long chases through the snow. Warmth had become more than survival, it had become comfort, peace, something sacred. One night, when the snow outside glowed under the moon and the sky shimmered with the faint green lights of the aurora, Garok sat alone by one of the small fires. The flames danced quietly, as if whispering secrets only he could hear. He thought of the old winters, of shivering nights, frozen tears, and bodies buried beneath snow. And he realized something profound. Warmth was not just heat. It was connection. When his people slept close, their breath joined with the air, their bodies shared the same rhythm. The fire, the stones, the furs all worked together, holding that rhythm, echoing it back. The cave itself had become a heart, beating softly in the dark. The children were the first to name him differently. They no longer called him boring caveman. They began calling him Garok the Warm. To them, warmth meant safety, and safety meant Garok. The name spread quickly, carried by laughter and gratitude. The elders began telling stories, not of hunts or battles, but of the night Garok's small flame saved them from the great blizzard. Around the fires, the hunters who once mocked him now told his story proudly. "He made fire sleep with us," one said, grinning. "He made stone hug us," said another. Garok only smiled, his eyes reflecting the flickering orange glow. He knew it was not magic, just thought, patience, and the courage to see differently. Yet, as every discovery does, his idea began to grow beyond what he could control. Other caves wanted to learn. Visitors from nearby tribes came to see the fire that sleeps. They offered gifts, hides, bones, dried meat in exchange for Garok's teachings. He showed them gladly, drawing shapes in the ash with a charred stick, circles for nests, lines for stone walls, dots for small fires. He demonstrated how air could flow through narrow gaps, how smoke could escape without stealing warmth. The visitors left amazed, promising to build their own warmth nests. For the first time, Garok's quiet mind was shaping not just one tribe, but many. But with attention came envy. Among his people, one man watched Garok's growing respect with cold eyes. Kroll, the strongest hunter, whose voice once ruled the fireside. Kroll had always believed strength kept the tribe alive, not thought. To him, Garok's ideas were soft, strange, almost dangerous. "He makes people weak," Kroll muttered one night, sharpening his spear. "Soon they forget the cold. Then they will forget fear. And when fear dies, men grow foolish." His words slithered into the ears of a few who still distrusted Garok's calm ways. They whispered that maybe the warmth nests trapped more than heat, maybe they trapped spirits, or made the air too soft for warriors' hearts. Garok did not hear these whispers. He was too busy perfecting his newest idea, layering animal fat between furs to create blankets that stayed warm even when damp. He had tested one himself, sleeping near the mouth of the cave where the air bit hardest. He woke feeling not frozen, but refreshed, his body alive with warmth. He named it the Sky Skin, because it felt like sleeping beneath a friendly sky. He planned to share it with everyone in the morning, not knowing that Kroll's envy was already stirring the next storm, one not made of snow, but of pride and fear. And so, the tribe slept peacefully, unaware of the tension brewing in the shadows. Outside, the winter deepened, the stars shining like frozen sparks across the black sky. Inside, the air glowed gold and red, filled with the soft murmurs of sleep. Garok sat by the fire's edge, lost in thought, tracing lines in the ash again, not of walls this time, but of something new, something he could not yet name. A way, perhaps, to make warmth live even after fire dies. The idea flickered in his mind like an ember waiting to be born. The winter thickened into a silent beast. Each dawn came slower, dimmer, as if the sun itself had grown weary of pushing through the clouds. Inside the cave, though, life flourished. Children played in the warmth nests, their laughter echoing against the stone. Elders smiled as they stretched their tired limbs, their bones no longer aching with cold. The hunters rested soundly through the night, their strength renewed. Garok's idea had become their salvation, a rhythm of life that pulsed like the steady beat of a drum. Yet beneath this peace, shadows stirred. Kroll, the great hunter, watched it all with eyes like chipped obsidian. Every smile, every grateful glance toward Garok, gnawed at his pride. He had always been the one people followed, the voice of power, the keeper of courage. But now, when danger passed and comfort reigned, his voice had grown quieter. The tribe no longer looked to the strongest spear, they looked to the calm thinker who spoke to stones. Kroll's resentment burned like a slow ember. He told himself that Garok's ways were dangerous, too gentle, too dependent on tricks of fire and rock. If one day the flame dies, he whispered to himself, these people will freeze. They will forget how to fight the cold. The thought festered. At night, when the tribe slept soundly in their warmth nests, Kroll sat by the outer fire, staring at the swirling snow. He gripped his spear tighter, imagining the world as it had been: harsh, raw, filled with struggle. That was the world that had made him strong. Garok's warmth was changing it. Weakness, he growled under his breath. He teaches them to love weakness. The tension began to creep into the tribe like frost through cracks. Some of the younger hunters, eager to please Krull, began to question Garok's methods. "We sleep too soft," one said. "Our muscles will forget the cold." Another added, "Fire makes us lazy." But the elders defended Garok. "Without his fire, your breath would be ice," said old Mara, her voice rough with years. "You would be bones beneath snow." Still, doubt is a dangerous seed, it grows even in warmth. The air inside the cave began to shift, no longer filled only with laughter, but whispers too. Garok noticed, but said nothing. He had always known that warmth could melt more than snow, it could melt the shape of old power, and that frightened men like Krull. One night, when the wind outside screamed louder than ever before, Krull made his move. He waited until Garok had left his small chamber to fetch more dried moss from the outer rocks. Then Krull called the tribe together near the main fire. His shadow loomed tall against the cave walls, his voice deep and commanding. "We have grown soft," he declared, his words echoing. "The old ways fade. We once slept with ice in our blood and woke stronger. Now we hide from the cold like frightened cubs." Some nodded hesitantly. Others frowned. Krull pointed toward the warmth nests, where children slept peacefully. "This," he said, his tone hardening, "is not strength. It is a dream that will betray us. When the great cold returns, and it will, no dream will save us. Only the strong will live." When Garok returned, the firelight flickered over uneasy faces. He sensed the change immediately, the air was thick, like before a storm. Krull turned to him, smiling a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Tell us, boring caveman," he said mockingly, using the old name like a blade, "what will happen when your little flames die? When the wood runs out? When the wind breaks through your stone walls? Will your thinking keep us warm then?" The cave fell silent. Even the fire seemed to hold its breath. Garok looked at Krull, then at the others, faces of friends, family, people who had shared their breath with him in the dark. He spoke softly, his voice calm, almost tender. "The fire dies only when we forget how to tend it," he said. "Warmth is not in the wood or the stone, it is in us. We make it live by staying close, by helping each other. That is strength." Krull snorted. "Pretty words," he said. "Let us see how strong your warmth is when the cold comes again." And before anyone could stop him, he kicked over one of the small fires. Sparks flew, smoke billowed, and the warmth nest went dark. Cries erupted, mothers shielding their children, elders coughing. "Enough!" Garok shouted, rushing forward. But Krull only laughed, his teeth flashing like stone under flame. "No," he thundered. "Let the cold test your magic." Then, with a wild gleam in his eyes, he strode toward the cave entrance and pulled away the hides that sealed it, letting a torrent of icy wind rush in. The fire sputtered, dying fast. The warmth fled like frightened birds. Panic spread through the tribe. The temperature dropped sharply, biting their skin, turning breath to mist. "Close it," someone screamed. "We'll freeze." But Krull stood firm, his arms crossed. "If warmth is truly in us," he mocked, "then prove it, thinker." His words stabbed at Garok, but Garok did not reply. Instead, he knelt by the fallen fire, his hands trembling from the cold. The ashes were still glowing faintly, tiny sparks of red, barely alive. He cupped them carefully in both hands, blowing softly, whispering words that were not speech but something older: rhythm, breath, memory. The sparks flared weakly, then died again. Around him, the tribe huddled close, shivering. Even Krull began to feel the sting of his defiance. Garok closed his eyes. He thought of the warmth not as fire, but as life, the same rhythm he had felt when his people slept close, their breaths joined. Slowly, he began to gather them. "Come," he said softly. "All of you. Together." They hesitated at first, but the cold pushed them forward. They formed a circle, pressing shoulder to shoulder, chest to back, their breaths mingling in the dark. Garok took a handful of moss, lit it with one of the last embers, and placed it between them. The fire grew faintly, struggling against the wind, but every breath they shared seemed to feed it. It flickered, caught, then bloomed again, small but steady. The air warmed, bit by bit, as if responding to their unity. Kroll watched, disbelief tightening his face. The warmth was returning, not from power, but from togetherness. He could feel it himself, though pride chained his tongue. When the wind finally slowed and the fire regained its strength, the cave glowed once more. Garok looked up, his breath heavy but steady. "Fire lives because we do," he said quietly. "The strong do not fight the cold alone. They make warmth together." The tribe murmured in agreement. Even Kroll's supporters lowered their eyes. The great hunter turned away, shame shadowing his face. He did not speak again that night. As dawn broke, light spilled into the cave, golden and gentle. The air was calm, the fires steady. The tribe moved slowly, quietly, humbled. They looked at Garok not with pity or teasing now, but with awe. The elders declared that from that night on, the warmth would be guarded by all, not as Garok's gift, but as their shared spirit. They named those who tended the fires the warmth keepers, and Garok, their first leader. Even Kroll, though silent, bowed his head in respect. Outside, the world was still frozen, but inside the cave, something far greater than fire burned: trust, unity, and the understanding that true warmth came not from what they held, but from what they shared. The snows began to soften as the moons passed, and slowly, the land woke from its frozen dream. Streams cracked open their icy shells, trickling once more through valleys that had long been silent. The first birds returned, their cries sharp and clean against the still air. But inside Garok's cave, the fire had never died. It had grown stronger, not just in flame, but in spirit. Every night, as the tribe gathered around their small, glowing hearths, the walls themselves seemed to hum with life. The warmth had changed them. They no longer slept scattered across cold stone floors but huddled close, sharing furs, laughter, and stories. The air was filled not with fear of the night, but with a peace that felt sacred. Garok would often sit near the smallest of the fires, his face calm, his hands tracing shapes in the dust, always thinking, always searching. What began as a single idea, one small fire in a tight chamber, had become the way of an entire people. The warmth keepers, chosen from among the tribe, tended to every flame with reverence. They learned how to feed it just enough to last the night, how to trap the smoke beneath stone shelves so it would not choke them, and how to layer hides to keep heat from escaping. To them, fire was no longer a tool, it was a companion. They sang low songs as they worked, songs that told of Garok's quiet wisdom and the night he taught them that warmth was life. And from these songs, something new was born: memory. For the first time, the tribe began to keep their past not just in the bodies of the living, but in words carried through generations. The nearby tribes came often now. They brought gifts, bones carved with symbols, baskets of dried berries, even precious flints. They came to learn, to sit within Garok's warmth nests and feel what true comfort meant. Some brought stories of their own, tales of beasts that roamed the ice plains, or of strange fires that fell from the sky and turned to stone. Garok listened to all of them. He never spoke much, but his presence made others speak more carefully, more deeply. He would sit still, his eyes half closed, as if weighing every word, then offer a few of his own. Those few words always changed something. It was during one of these visits that a woman from the river tribe, tall and sharp-eyed, asked Garok a question that made him pause. "You say warmth lives in us," she said, her voice curious but serious. "But what happens when we are far from fire? When we travel the plains or sleep under open sky?" Garok looked into the flame before answering. "Then carry warmth with you," he said simply. She frowned. "How?" He smiled faintly, picking up a fur blanket and pressing it against a flat stone that had sat beside the fire all day. "The stone remembers," he said, handing it to her. The woman touched it, eyes widening as she felt the trapped heat seep into her hands. The tribe murmured in surprise. From that day forward, the people began heating stones before sleep, placing them beside their bodies in the night. It was a simple act, yet it changed everything: the first primitive form of insulation, the first portable warmth. Seasons turned. Where once the tribe had been a small, struggling group hidden in one mountain hollow, they now stood as teachers. Visitors became allies, and allies became kin. They traded more than goods, they traded ideas. Garok taught them how to shape caves with narrow entrances to block wind, how to dig shallow pits to hold fire's breath, how to use fat from hunted beasts to seal cracks in stone. In return, they taught him about herbs that eased coughs, paints made from crushed berries, and new ways to weave hides. The tribe began to thrive beyond survival, they began to live. And as life grew easier, new parts of their souls awoke. Art bloomed. Songs deepened. Children began drawing shapes in soot on the walls, not of fearsome hunts, but of warmth itself, spirals of flame, circles of sleeping figures, and in the center of it all, a quiet man with calm eyes. Garok. But not all the change was gentle. For as the tribe grew, so too did memories wait. Some began to see the warmth keepers not only as caretakers but as sacred beings, holders of the flame's soul. They built small altars near the fires, leaving gifts of berries or carved bones, whispering thanks before sleep. Garok tried to stop them. "The fire does not need worship," he said softly one night. "Only care." But his words could not undo what had already begun. Warmth had become more than survival, it had become faith. The people no longer feared the dark because they believed the fire watched over them. And perhaps, in some way, it did. For the winters that followed were the kindest they had ever known. Still, Garok's heart carried a quiet unease. He often wandered to the mouth of the cave at night, feeling the cold wind on his skin, as if to remind himself that the world was still vast and untamed. He knew warmth was a gift, but he also knew comfort could dull the spirit if one forgot the cold. Sometimes he would sleep alone near the entrance, letting the chill bite him awake. To remember, he told himself. When children asked him why he did not stay near the big fires, he smiled and said, "The fire must know where it came from, the cold." The warmth keepers began to call this practice the balance, a ritual of respect between heat and frost. One night, under a sky thick with stars, Garok sat by the outermost fire with Krull. Time had softened the hunter's pride. His hair had gone silver, and his once fierce eyes were gentler now. They sat in silence for a long while, watching the flames. Finally, Krull spoke. "You were right," he said. "The strong are not those who fight the cold, but those who share warmth." Garok nodded slowly. "The cold still has its place," he murmured. "Without it, we would never know the fire's worth." Krull chuckled. "Always thinking," he said, shaking his head. "Still boring." Garok smiled. "Still warm," he replied. The two men sat together until dawn, the fire painting their faces gold as the first light crept into the sky. When spring finally came, and the snows melted into rivers that sang down the mountains, Garok stood once more at the cave's entrance. Below, he could see smoke rising from many places, distant valleys, far-off cliffs. Fires. His fires. The world was no longer cold, not because the winter had ended, but because warmth had spread through caves, through hearts, through time itself. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply. The air smelled of thawing earth and new life. Behind him, laughter rang out, children playing, mothers calling, the crackle of flames. The tribe had grown large, strong, and peaceful. And Garok, the once boring caveman, had become something far greater than he ever sought to be, the quiet spark that lit the first age of warmth. The years rolled by like gentle waves, carrying the tribe further from the brutal winters of their ancestors. What once had been a fight for survival had become a rhythm of life, guided by warmth, care, and connection. Children were born who had never known the sting of a night spent shivering on bare stone. To them, warmth was the way the world was meant to be, an ever-present comfort, glowing softly at the heart of every home. The warmth keepers had grown into an honored circle, their duties passed carefully from one generation to the next. They taught not only how to tend the fires, but also how to tend the spirit, to listen, to think, to live gently, as Garok once had. But time, as it always does, began to weigh upon Garok himself. His hair, once dark as the cave's shadows, had turned to silver. His back bent slightly from years of gathering stones and wood. Yet his eyes, those calm, thoughtful eyes, still held the same quiet fire that had lit their first warm night. He no longer hunted or carried heavy loads. Instead, he taught the young ones how to build and balance flame. They listened with awe, sitting cross-legged around him, their faces golden in the firelight. A flame, he would say softly, holding up a small stick, is not tamed by strength. It listens to breath, not to force. You blow too hard, it dies. You breathe gently, it grows. And then he would smile, that small, knowing smile that had guided them all these years. One evening, as autumn crept across the land once more, Garok felt the chill return to the air. He knew what it meant, the cold was coming again. The tribe was ready, stronger than ever, their caves prepared, their fires plentiful. But deep inside, Garok sensed another kind of winter, not of weather, but of time. His strength was fading. He could feel it in the slowness of his steps, the heaviness in his chest. Still, he continued his quiet walks to the edge of the valley, where he would sit and watch the smoke rising from other tribes' fires in the distance. It filled him with peace. Warmth had spread farther than he had ever dreamed. That night, he returned to the cave later than usual. The stars above glowed like sparks frozen in the sky, and the moonlight danced across the snow-capped peaks. Inside, the air shimmered with life, laughter, conversation, and the steady crackle of dozens of fires. His people, his family. They greeted him with smiles, offered him food, but he waved them off gently. "Eat," he said. "Keep strong. The fire burns well tonight." He walked deeper into the cave, to the smallest chamber, the one where it had all begun so many winters ago. The stones were smooth now, darkened by years of smoke, but the warmth felt the same. Familiar. Kind. He sat down beside the little fire that still glowed there, its light flickering softly across the walls. Outside, the wind began to rise, whispering through the cracks like an old friend. Garok closed his eyes and listened. He thought of the first night, of how the snow had screamed outside while he built this very flame, how his tribe had shivered in fear, and how the warmth had slowly gathered around them like a promise. He remembered the faces of those who were long gone, Mara the elder, the children who had once slept at his feet, even Kroll, who had learned in the end that strength could live in gentleness. All of them were part of the warmth now. "It never dies," Garok whispered, feeling the fire's breath on his fingers. "It only changes hands." He lay back on his bed of furs and moss, watching the flames dance. The room pulsed softly with light, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. The warmth brushed his face, soft as dawn. His breaths grew slower, steadier. Outside, the wind howled, but it could not enter. The cave was sealed in peace. Before sleep took him, he smiled and spoke one last time, though no one was there to hear it. Let the warmth keep them safe. By morning, the little fire still burned, steady and calm. When the tribe found Garok, he looked as if he were simply sleeping, his hand resting near the coals. They did not weep, not right away. They sat around him in silence, feeling the warmth that still lingered in the room. It felt alive, almost sacred, as though Garok himself had become part of it. The elders said that night that he had not died, only moved into the fire. And so began a tradition that would last through the ages. From that day forward, every fire was lit from Garok's last flame, passed carefully from stone to stone, cave to cave, a living thread of warmth linking all who shared it. Seasons passed. Generations rose and fell. The tribe grew into many, spreading across valleys and plains, carrying their fires with them. They built larger hearths, deeper caves, then shelters of wood and clay. The warmth keepers became the first storytellers, the first builders, the first teachers. They spoke of Garok, the boring caveman who had taught humanity that warmth was not just fire, it was connection, compassion, and the power to think beyond the moment. His name changed over time, reshaped by tongues and accents, until it became something more symbolic, the first sleeper, the quiet one, the maker of warmth. And even as thousands of winters came and went, his gift never faded. Every fire ever kindled, every hearth that glowed in the heart of a home, carried a spark of that first night when one quiet man refused to accept the cold. When people gathered around their fires, they did not know his name anymore, but they carried his wisdom in their bones, to stay close, to share warmth, to let thought guide strength. And in every flicker of flame, in every breath of smoke, in every soft night of sleep beneath the glow of firelight, Garok lived on. For though the world had moved on, though caves became huts, huts became homes, and homes became cities, the secret remained the same. Warmth begins not with fire, but with heart. And so, even now, when the nights grow long and winter whispers through the walls, somewhere deep in the blood of humankind, the ancient memory of Garok's fire still burns, reminding all that even in the coldest times, the smallest spark, born of quiet thought and gentle care, can keep the world alive.